Welcome to Beyond the Closing Table. I'm your host, Michael Martin, and I'm here to interview top producing real estate agents, top producing loan officers, and successful business owners. I am super excited today to have my friend Sam Ratto, who owns Videri Chocolate and Golf, a newer place open in Raleigh.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all kinds of stuff to dig into. So I really appreciate you being here.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you, man. So I'm going to ask just some obvious questions up front. Before we talk about chocolate, what were you doing before chocolate?
I worked in the action sports industry.
Okay.
And I worked for a company called Podium Distribution. They had DVS Shoe Company, Maddox Clothing, and Lakai Limited Footwear, and they're like umbrella of companies. And I got a job in their warehouse I worked at a pizza place on the Hermosa Beach Pier, like back in, the turn of the century, whatever, 2000. And the guy that owned the place, Bill Graw, who was a really interesting, very neat business owner himself, like one of those people you meet and you're like, how did you do this? How did this work? How did you make this happen? And he was very open, and he was, I was his night manager, and I was like 19, 20. Was I 21? I don't know. It doesn't even matter. I was 20 years old. And I worked from 3 p.m. until 3 a.m., 4 or 5 days a week at a pizza place on the Hermosa Beach Pier that we made essentially sheet pan pizzas. And from like 9 or 10 p.m., it was either cheese or pepperoni. And you just sold slices for $2.25 or $2.50 or whatever it was. And sodas, he didn't have any beer because you're on the Hermosa Beach Pier. But I was working there, and every once in a while he'd come in on a Saturday or Sunday or whatever with his buddies. And one of his buddies was the owner of DVS Shoe Company. And I was like, I would love to work there one day. And he's like, well, you're my best manager, so you're not going anywhere. And I was like, this sucks.
He owned the pizza shop?
He owned the pizza place, right? So long story short, his buddy wanted to buy the pizza shop from him, like a guy that worked there and his brother. And he was like, hey, I'm getting out of this business, so I got you an interview at DVS. And I was like, this is insane. And they had just moved down from the valley to the city that I grew up in Torrance, California. And so I literally was working, it was 8 a.m. to like 4 or 5 p.m. there. And then I would go to the pizza place afterwards and like do double shifts. Because when you're 20, 21, you don't have to stop moving or whatever. And I started working in the warehouse, and a good friend of mine, still to this day, Gabe Clement, was my like manager. He was a sales manager. And they just moved in, so there's piles of this thing here, and they're trying to organize where they're going to put samples and all that kind of jazz. And my job was essentially the warehouse manager. But what I really did was intake, deliveries from wherever, send out samples to people, and then like kind of keep the warehouse. And one of my first like projects was, there was this whole pile of lumber in the corner of the warehouse that they just hadn't gotten around to moving. And I think they disassembled a mini ramp somewhere else. And my boss was like, if you can do this in like 2 weeks, I'll like take you out to dinner or something, or take you surfing or whatever it was. I did it in a day. And he was like, wow, that was fast. And I go, you said you were going to build a mini ramp, so I just wanted to, do it. And that kind of got me to this place in
like a mini ramp for skateboarding?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So they had a full-size basketball court, and then they put a mini ramp in, and then you had your like, shipping computers and all that kind of stuff. And then on the other side, it was a fenced-in cage where they kept all the samples. And then
I got to be honest with you, I'm not familiar with the shoe company. What is it called?
It was called DVS Shoe Company. It since has sold, I think, maybe a couple times to different people or whatever.
Okay. What kind of shoes do they make?
They made skateboarding shoes, and whatever quote unquote lifestyle shoes.
Got it. So like not like Vans, but kind of like whatever.
Yeah, it would be in that same category.
Yeah.
They started in 1995 in the Valley. These two brothers, and then a pro skateboarder, Tim Gavin, was their sort of VP of marketing, but he was really just building a skateboarding team, and then was just an amazing human to like go around with. But that's where I kind of got my start in skateboarding, and then I got a job as the like assistant international salesperson, and I was terrible at the job.
For the shoe company?
Yeah, for the shoe company. I was terrible at the job. But my desk was right next to the staircase that all the designers and the artists and the clothing designers and the shoe designers, they would all walk up this staircase to get to their office, and shocker, I would go and talk to them or whatever. And I remember one time, this skateboarder, Steve Barra, who's like famous in that world.
Yeah.
He was like walking by and he asked me some question about something. I probably talked to him for 15 or 20 minutes. And my boss comes out the door and he's like, hey, you have to make like 35 calls today. And I was like, I do. That was like this one really interesting moment where I'm like, but I'm talking to Steve Barrett. Like, I'm watching him skateboard my whole life. So I go get a review. I think I've worked there for maybe 6 or 8 months. And it's in February. And sitting in this review. And it's like 5 minutes in the review. And I'm legitimately going, well, it was really fun to work here. I mean, clearly I'm not good at my job. And like, this isn't working out. And
It's nice to meet some cool people.
yeah, I was like, this is great. Like, this is cool. Like, I got to see, like, maybe I want to be in this industry kind of a thing. And the CFO he goes, no. Like, you're not good at this job, but we have another job that we think you'd be great at. And it was essentially being the assistant team manager to all the team managers, where a team manager would essentially send me, hey, you gotta send clothes to this person or whatever. And, here's an order. And so my upbringing of getting information from like international sales where like I understood like all of the shoe codes and the clothing codes, and I knew how to like go in the inventory system. And so I could essentially, if let's say a good example is like Jerron Wilson would start calling me and go, hey Ratto, I need, whatever shoes, I'm going on this trip, I need them sent to my house, or I'm in New York and you have to do this. And so I could, ship stuff and whatever. And if I had to go to the warehouse, which was offsite, I go to the warehouse, pick orders, and like get them, get it out that day, kind of a thing. And it was a really incredible job. I think I was 21 or 22, and I'm just working in this industry where I send stuff out to all these like pro surfers that I knew, or motorcycle dudes that I'm learning about, or snowboarders, or like skateboarders, and all these different things. And then they had, I think at the time they had 4 or 5 teams for DVS, and then they had for Maddox Clothing, they just had a skate team. And then Kelly Bird took care of Lakai Footwear. And it was just really interesting because you'd meet a whole bunch of really interesting people. But that's what I did for maybe 2 or 3 years. And then one of the owners bought an RV, and we were out partying one night. And he goes, hey, do you want to drive an RV around the country? And I was like, I absolutely do. I think I was 23 or 24 years old. At the time,
yeah.
I'm single. I'm like, I don't know. I'm living with like 2 of my buddies in a house. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I don't know what it entails, but I'm in. And so they pick up this RV that was one of those conversion RVs that a former pro snowboarder had outfitted to be like a 4-wheel drive, all-weather kind of terrain vehicle. Mm-hmm. So, he had the pipes insulated so they didn't freeze and all this kind of stuff. And my boss was like, all right, you're going to places. And I just kind of said, okay, I'll do whatever. And they would literally say, go to, Big Bear Mountain and you have a demo. Your job is to go out there, hand out stickers, throw t-shirts out. If there's a team rider or a rep or a shop, bring them into the RV, give them some beers.
And what a shitty job.
Oh, dude, it was, you want to talk about being 23 years old. And again, I grew up surfing and skateboarding. And for a small period of time, like I was a sponsored surfer from like this surf shop I worked for. And then you go into this world where like you're always at the front of the line essentially, or you're interacting with people that you've watched on surf videos your whole life, or, this ex-pro surfer is now a team manager and you and him are buddies because you're trying to figure out how to get whatever pro surfer, they're trying to get him clothes, you're trying to get him shoes. And it was wild. And so they had that RV, and I was still doing, like, those were more like weekend trips where I would go somewhere on like Friday and then come back on Monday and still do my team manager job. And then I think it was like 2004, 2005. I was on the road too much, and their business was growing, and it was in an economic upturn, and action sports was it was sort of really trying to be a thing. And that company that I worked for was right below DC, and like they call it Core Skate Brands. And we were in most skateboard shops and surf shops and snowboard shops and stuff in America. So they were like, we want you to go on the road, essentially drive around the country. And so they bought a bigger RV.
Like a sales rep?
No, that was the craziest part is I didn't have any deliverables. Like I was supposed to get the RV there and party.
Just hang out with them.
Literally.
Wow.
One year I got in one of my annual reviews, I got a raise because I could party well with like all different kinds of people. And
Wow.
I was like, this is cool, you know? And so they bought like a luxury RV. It was like legitimately $250,000 RV. And when I first saw it, I called my mom and I said, Mom, I need your help putting stuff in here. This is a mini apartment essentially, like cleaning supplies and whatever. And I didn't go to college. So my mom was like, well, this is like you going to college and I'm like getting your dorm outfitted or whatever. And so I drove that around the country for that and another one for the next like 3 to 5 years kind of a thing.
I can't even fathom.
I'll show you some pictures. You can fathom it.
I was like, I can't fathom all the stuff that has probably went on in that place.
It was crazy.
I'm sure it was wild.
It was, but before...
if they would have had the idea, this would have been the perfect reality show to follow you around the freaking country doing that stuff.
So that was like the beginning of that, like, you know, YouTube kind of, you know, influencer, whatever you want to call it. And me and my buddy Matt Staker filmed a pilot for, I forget the name, Fuel TV at the time or something like that. And, you know, we got some like interest or whatever. And my bosses were like, you can't do this. You can't be whatever. But I drove it around the country for 3 or 4 years, 5 years almost. I put like 250,000 miles on an RV.
Wow. That was your job.
That was my job. And I would go to surfing and skateboarding and snowboarding.
And you get to snowboard and skate and all that stuff
whatever.
Yeah.
It was really fun. It was really fun.
doubt.
And I still have like really good friends that I interact with and truly deeply love because you have this connection, to that job, but also just, you know, when you're driving around the country. One time we were driving around the country, we were going from LA to New York and we got a flat tire and the person who put the tire on put the wrong size on. So later in that trip, the tread on that inner like dually wheel came off and it essentially, we learned that it knocked the muffler off of the engine block and we didn't know. And it just like the engine would overheat and it was just kind of weird. And me and my buddy Staker were driving through Colorado, I think, and we're trying to get up like from Denver up to Aspen. And we're just like stuck out in the middle of nowhere, letting the RV cool down or whatever it was. And we saw a creek and we had some fishing rods and we go fishing for like 2 hours. Get back in the RV, drive for 2 hours, stop, fish in this creek, and like weird shit like that. And then in 2008, somebody made a big mistake.
You had enough money. You were getting paid enough money that, you know.
I didn't even care.
Yeah. I mean, I get it.
I mean, I didn't even care. It was like one of those things before I got a...
They're basically paying for your lifestyle.
Dude, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. I was terrible with money. I mean, I didn't like go into credit card debt.
Most people are, by the way. Like most people suck at money.
Yeah. Like I didn't go into credit card debt, but I was just like getting paid and I would just go party. Like when I was off work, I was partying kind of a thing. And then I was buying all sorts of like, you know, you're in New York or you're in Miami or you're anywhere, you go into a skate shop and you're like, oh, I want a pair of those or I want to get that thing or whatever it was. So it was crazy. And then in 2008, somebody made a big mistake on a sample order that was literally my department's budget. And they let myself and this other guy go. And I was like, thank you very much. I don't want to die doing this. and that's what kind of led
that is a job you can only have for so long. I just wanted to take a quick second and say thank you so much for watching our podcast so far. If you do me a huge favor before you forget about it, to like, subscribe, and if you would, just leave a quick comment about what you think of the podcast. And if you want to share it with your friends, I'd love that too. Thanks again so much. We'll finish up right now.
There's people that I know that still are in that world that have that job, and I see them every once in a while. I'm just like, brother, you gotta take a nap every once in a while. You gotta turn it down. But yeah, it's cool.
Oh my gosh, you know it's funny. That country song, I'm pretty good at drinking beer.
Yeah.
Right. It's like I was like remember hearing that song for the first time, going, I need a job that I can get paid where I'm drinking beer. You found one for sure right there. That's great.
It was a job.
We've converted ours into somewhat of one. We do a lot of happy hours and socials. We had our last week we had our 4th annual St. Patrick's Day bar crawl downtown with about 25 real estate agents. It's just super fun.
So you should have an event at Golf.
We should. We need to work on that for sure. That's right. You want to talk about that? We'll jump into golf shortly. So you finished this journey that you were on, and then you go chocolate. Probably
Yeah.
not quite that.
I'm
And what got you here?
so my ex-wife Star
Okay.
was from Winston-Salem, and when her and I lived in Long Beach, California, and I got laid off, I just said I want to do something different with my life, just anything. And both sides of my family are farmers, so I was like, I'm not going to move to Modesto and start farming, or I don't really want to get into produce sales with my grandfather and my uncle at the time. My uncle had his own like produce brokering business. I was like, I don't really know what I want to do. I love golf. I love being outside, and I want to change my life, and I don't want it to be centered around essentially partying was the best way to put it. You know? And I just kind of like started mulling this stuff over, and I said, I want to move and go to a PGM school. And there was 3 that were good in the nation at the time: Oklahoma State, Penn State, and NC State. I didn't want to live in where Oklahoma State is. Just no offense to the town or whatever, but I was like, I don't really feel like moving to the middle of the country.
And this was school for at NC State for what specifically?
At those universities, they have a PGA, like PGM school, like they call it, like I forget what the PGM stands for, but like professional golf management.
Yeah.
And you could go into anything. You could be a teacher, you could be a head pro, you could get into events and coordinating, you could get into golf equipment. Like they just essentially, the PGA of America essentially got these universities to kind of, most universities have all this different stuff that people can go take, and they're like, oh, you have an ag department. Oh, well, you can have a turf grass management from that ag
I knew
department.
they had all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I had no idea they had a PGA school. That's
Yeah.
pretty wild.
So that was, and I said, I've been through here a couple times on my journeys, and I really liked Raleigh in the area. And then it being located where you could go to the beach in 2 hours and the mountains in a couple hours, and then getting on a plane to New York City in an hour and a half was pretty tantalizing. And so her and I moved here, and, I started going back to Wake Tech, and I got a job at Escazú where her and Mordecai worked.
Yeah.
And my job was to sort and roast beans. And I was like, I'll do this forever. And that's how I got into chocolate.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So you actually are one of the people that's worked at a competitor's place, learned how to do it, and then just decided to go do it yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it was a really interesting thing because they were in 2009 when I got the gig, they were transitioning from...
They're by Standard, right?
Yeah, or Stanberry.
Stanberry, sorry. Yeah.
They were a confectioner to begin with, really high quality bonbons, all these really interesting flavors, and they would make, things with nuts in it and all that kind of stuff. And they were originally on Glenwood in one of those old houses.
Mm-hmm.
I forget I think probably Beer Garden is there now or something like that. But they were there, and then they moved. Well, they started in Beaufort, and then they moved here, and then they got that space next to Stanberry. And they were transitioning, so they got all this really cool old equipment, and it was the beginning of like sorting the beans and roasting them and winnowing and doing all that stuff. And I'd never seen it before, and I didn't really even know that like chocolate grew on a tree, or a cacao pod looked like a mini football, or that at that point I'd never even tasted fresh cacao before. Like it never crossed my mind.
Well, I mean, who has?
Yeah, like it was one of those, oh, it's weird. But the weird part was it was one of those things where I would do a job and I would take notes and I would just sit and grind and noodle on it. And then they were amicable to me to come in there. And my job was, at the beginning, it was 2 days a week. It was very part-time. It was just like, hey, come in here. We sort these 3 bags of beans, this week, and roast them and winnow them, get them ready for the grinders. And then Mordecai will take it from there. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I just started asking, like, hey, can I sweep this stuff up? Can I make this thing over here? Can I try a different way to sort beans? Or
Roughly what year was this?
this was 2009.
2009, okay.
And then all through 2010. And long story short, the people that owned it weren't the greatest to work for, and they weren't. The weirdest way to put it is you would go into work, and I'm so excited I'm there. I'm like, this is amazing. We were at a chocolate shop. And for whatever reason, the 2 owners and their business partners it wasn't like a fun place to go into work. And your job doesn't have to be fun all the time, but you would think that working in a chocolate shop, you'd have some energy towards like, this is awesome. Like we turn those
making
beans,
freaking chocolate.
Turn those beans into this thing that people want to buy from us. And my dad came down from New York, and we were talking about something once, and he goes, if you're going to start your own company, like who are the first 5 people you would hire? And that kind of got my wheels rolling. And then
was kind of the entrepreneurial like fuel, like him asking that question.
Yeah, and
or had you already been talking about starting your business?
No, I mean it was truly one of those things where kind of, he said it out loud, and I was like, maybe I could do this, because I didn't go to pastry school. I'm not a chef. I don't really know how to bake a cake. But for some reason, taking those beans that smell like vinegar or spices or, whatever it is, and roasting them and making them into chocolate, like, made sense for some reason. And then getting feedback from people being like, oh, this chocolate tastes good, and you made it, was kind of a weird thing. I was like, oh, this is really cool. And, when I was younger, me and a couple of buddies tried to start like a t-shirt company, or even working at that, skateboard company. You're around all these people who started their own companies. And so maybe it was those years of hearing people talk about it, or seeing people start a company, or even, friends of mine that were team riders that started their own apparel company, or they went off and did like a soft goods or hard goods company or whatever. You would see all these people do this stuff, and you're just like, and then when my dad said that, it kind of clicked, maybe I could try this. And that's like how it started.
Wow. So the question I think you said he asked was, what would the first 5 employees be?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, what was your answer? Or at least what
at the time, it was my mom.
Yeah.
First person was my mom, because
she lives here.
No, she lives in Texas now, but she's worked for Toyota at that time. She worked for Toyota for like 20 plus years or something. Okay. And Toyota's all about like lean efficiency, lean management. Mm-hmm. Like, they're constantly looking to improve a process.
Yes.
They're constantly trying to figure out what's the best way to do this to get a product to our customer. And the combination of the best way to do something and get it to a customer that our customer wants to buy, just hearing all that. And then the last job my mom had was University of Toyota, where they essentially wrote scripts and SOPs, essentially in like handbooks for service and parts drive people.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
it's funny. They turn those guys really into salespeople.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. Right.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of loans for service people.
Yeah.
And they get paid a commission. Right?
Yeah.
I don't think people realize that.
Yeah. And the interesting part is Toyota has to match, like, hey, we have to sell these things, and a salesperson selling those things to people. So you have a lot of salespeople who want to sell you a transmission fluid flush, which, by the way, you should never get. That makes them $85 every time they sell one of those to somebody. But Toyota's like, hey, we don't need to do that. And they're like, yeah, I'm going to sell it to them because I make $85 on this. Toyota's like, we need you to sell like tire rotations and things that keep these cars on the road, that keep the resale value high. Because if our resale value is high, then people will keep buying our cars because they last a long time. Mm-hmm. And so my mom would go into service and parts drives at the end of her career and essentially do trainings and learn and all that kind of stuff, while being in the Toyota system of what's the best way to get your job done, or what's the best way to try and figure out these things.
Creating efficiencies constantly, right?
So she was one of the first 5 people. I don't remember the other 5. It was probably my buddy Matt Deek to do design, and another buddy, that kind of thing. But none of those people worked for me, luckily, because the first 7 to 10 years of running that place, I was so bad at managing people. So
yeah, that part is challenging.
It's tough.
Yeah, people have these things called emotions.
Yeah. And then I have emotions, and then I don't know how to match them up with somebody else. So it's great.
Yeah, it's a lot of that's. You didn't go to college, so you certainly didn't go to business school. Not that business school is going to teach you that either.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Right,
no.
But learning how to, and I didn't go to business school. But you don't learn any of that stuff. That it's like you've just got to get in the middle and screw up. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, for some people and for you, you both get to deal with all of that as you're learning how to do this. Right? Yeah. The number of employees that I've had, we act like we think we are a very tight group. We got a great group of people. Nicole's been with me now for 10 years. Taylor and Jody have been with me for over almost 3.5, 4 years. Yeah. And just had her first year anniversary, and we just hired a new person. Jocelyn, that does like our events. She's part-time. Mm-hmm. But I found her actually through Tanya and Jerry. Mm-hmm. They interviewed her and they didn't have a position for her. And they're like, what do you think? I was like, perfect. Yeah. So, but yeah, I have made, God bless, I still do make, lots of mistakes.
You're a human being.
That's right. Yeah. So, cool, man. That's a neat story. All right. So, let's kind of take that a little bit more forward. So you are at the point where, like, your dad came up, gave you this kind of idea, maybe not even necessarily intending to, but it just happened. Yeah. So the spark is ignited. And then what happens? Like, how do you make it happen? Because, like, holy crap, thinking about, like, I think the barrier to entry, right, to different businesses varies dramatically. And I would think creating a chocolate company would have a pretty big barrier. The equipment cannot be cheap.
I think if I knew how hard it was, I wouldn't have done it.
Sure.
You know, at the time, the way that chocolate was, excuse me, was being made, bean to bar.
And I do know that you created something that like a bunch of other companies use now, right? Like,
We in 2015 we launched a grinder company that we actually physically made in Greensboro and sold grinders to people,
Yeah.
which was another foolishly just like, oh, we'll try this and do it. But yeah, I wouldn't have done it if I would have known how hard it was.
yeah. Even if you know you would end up where you are now.
No,
No.
no, because naively you go, I wrote a business plan that, we have, 3 little grinders and we got a roaster and a little winnower and a tempering machine. Like, boom, we're off, we're going. And you have no idea how much energy it takes to like create good branding and then have that be legal branding and then have it be in accordance with like Whole Foods can buy it from you and sell it to people. That's the stuff. And then all the while, Star and I found out that her and I were pregnant 15 days after, like maybe not even 10 days after opening the doors. And so then
at least the doors were open.
Yeah, you're learning how to be a business owner, and also you're about to be a dad, and you're trying to be a husband, and it was just it's wild. So I wouldn't have done it in that way. And now, like with golf, I have all this empirical knowledge of physically going, oh, I know I'm gonna need to do this, and this is gonna be a big push, and you have to have this, and this is proper, and you have to make sure you have a good accountant, and you have to have somebody who's good at doing your taxes and just the little tiny minutia of it. But no, if I would have known, I mean, it took 10 years to get to the place where it's like, this is a business. This is a real business where we have proper like HR standards. We have like good workers' comp. If somebody gets in an issue or whatever at work, there's somebody to call that isn't me, the owner. Like if they have a problem with me, they can call somebody and go, hey, Sam said this weird thing to me. It made me feel uncomfortable or whatever it is.
Sure, kind of like an HR department.
Yeah, like luckily doesn't happen that often. But I would never, knowing now, I wouldn't start, like if let's say somebody bought me out of Videri and I had like a non-compete for a year, I wouldn't be itching to make another one.
Yeah.
Because of just the amount of institutional knowledge, number one, but kind of what we were talking about before of Videri is a thing that people believe in because they've had experiences over the past almost 14 years. There's an incredible group of people. Like Carrie's worked there for 11 plus years. Mordecai's celebrating his 10-year anniversary this year. I mean,
so Mordecai left the other company and came to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a nickname?
No,
that's his actual name.
Yeah. There's probably some genesis story of that, of like his parents being like, "This is a cool name," and he's like, "Thanks for this."
Well, I mean, right near where the other chocolate factory was, there's Mordecai, right?
Yeah.
Or Mordecai, I don't know, everybody.
Yeah, it's all different, but yeah. So that would be, I would say, I wouldn't do it again in that way. But that being said, when I started golf, it was, I would say, a little bit more straightforward because I kind of knew you got to register with the Secretary of State. You got to get, an EIN number. You got to do all this like little minutia stuff, I had like workers' comp insurance before I had hired an employee, little tiny stuff like that, but also a much more simplified version of a business too.
Yeah. It's really interesting to think about the fact that, if you really knew all the stuff that you would have had to do, that you would like, forget it. That's just way too much work, way too much hassle. I don't want to deal with all that. But once you're committed to it, it kind of is what it is, right? Yeah. It's like, I just got to keep going.
Yeah.
Either that or fail completely, right? You only fail when you quit. So
yeah.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about branding. So you mentioned that a minute ago. That was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you anyway. In fact, just before this, you and I were talking a little bit about personal branding and actual branding. But how did you come up? Is the Videri logo today the same as it was when you first started? And specifically, what is the brand for Videri?
So, I mean, the brand for Videri it's a welcoming, friendly chocolate factory in downtown Raleigh, located in a historic building. Well, not technically a historic landmark, but old railroad depot. But the genesis of it was my original business partner, Star, and I were sitting in a room trying to come up with a name because as a placeholder, I came up with I think it was like Cardinal Chocolate Company or something, something, or Capital City Chocolate Company or something like that. And we didn't want to use that because it wasn't specific, but it was this weird general. And let's say we ever moved somewhere, or you got a bigger chocolate factory in Wilson or something, wouldn't really be that anymore. And so we're going through all this stuff, and our former business partner had a literary degree. And so we're sitting in this room, and he goes, well, the North Carolina state motto is Esse Quam Videri. We could use the word Videri, ties us to North Carolina, and it sort of, showcases in a really cool way that, we're from North Carolina.
I don't know if anybody ever puts that together. But
Yeah.
it's pretty wild.
And we get marketing all over the state. But what it was really interesting is it sounds really nice. Videri sounds nice. It sounds like something you would, appetizing. But iconography-wise, a V as the beginning letter, and then the way that it all sort of shapes out, worked out. And then we got connected with the Splinter Group. They were in Carborough. I'm not sure if they're still around or not. But they were the first ones that kind of came up with that logo. And over the 14 years, we've had an adjustment from this group in Florida that they redid our website maybe back in 2013 or something like that. And then when Baldwin took over, they've just sort of massaged it into a better place. And now in the past 2 to 3 years, we've had to bring a lot of our design work in-house because we don't have the ability to sort of churn revenue super high. So getting Baldwin, even though they everybody there is so amazing and near and dear to my heart, it's hard for us to sort of go, yes, we want to spend $35,000 on this packaging redesign when the gross revenue from this product in a year will be $12,000. I want it to be this beautiful, wonderful, everything is there and dialed in. Like when Baldwin took over our branding and essentially company voice, everything was just dialed in.
Wow.
I mean, our website, the look and the feel of that is all Bob Renew, and Jen Matthews has put a lot of really good time into it, and everybody at Baldwin, done a lot of really good work with us and for us. And that part of it is I can't draw. If you ask me to draw something, I'm horrible, I'm terrible. But I have a good enough design eye that if a good high quality designer, very creative person, they give you something and you go, I want it to kind of look a little bit like this, and kind of let them take it away.
Some direction, yeah.
Yeah, and
I feel like I could do a little bit of that, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's really just kind of nudging it in one way, or they show you something that's it, we don't have to work on that anymore. That may be a skill of mine that I would never get paid for, but it's something that's that looks right. Or even thinking about how that's going to look on a shelf from 7 feet away.
There's somebody from Ad Agency that has that job somewhere.
Yeah.
It's interesting, to my talents, I don't have a talent like that. I'm sure you've probably seen some of Finley's work. My daughter is this incredible artist at 15. And Tanya actually can draw some stuff. I was surprised to watch her do so, because she never talks about it. She didn't do it. But Finley just has this incredible eye. It's amazing. She's just taken off. It's been a lot of fun to watch her.
How old is she now?
15, man.
She's driving? She
is driving. We've got 50 of our 60 hours in. And so she'll have her license in September. Wow. She's going to take Mom's XC60. And awesome. We're not sure we're going to Tanya, but it's wild. And she's playing guitar and singing now. She's got a performance, her first one this coming Saturday. So we're super excited about it. Wow. So that part's interesting. I really appreciate you sharing the story about the Videri and where that name came from, because I don't think I could tell you. I certainly didn't know that. And I'd be shocked if most people put that together. I'm sure some people, North Carolina historians or something may put that one together.
Maybe.
Yeah. It's interesting. Cool. You kind of mentioned something earlier, but this was a question I wanted to ask from just about chocolate specifically is what should someone know about chocolate that most people just don't like? What do you think most people should know but don't have any idea
of? How hard it is to farm cacao.
Yeah. Where is it farmed? I'm guessing
it's along the equator, Capricorn and Cancer, and that.
So kind of where coffee is, or no?
Yeah, but at lower altitudes. I don't think it really grows above 500 meters. It probably can grow anywhere in that equatorial belt. But how hard is to farm, and
what makes it so hard to farm?
It's not farmed on we drive east of here and you see all those farmlands. There's rows and irrigation systems and tractors. If you were to think about going on a hike in Umstead and the terrain is just like this, that's where cacao is.
Wow.
It's not good cacao is not grown in like straight rows. There are some people that are like working on trying to, get an heirloom tree and a new varietal like CCN 51 or something, like a hybrid or something, kind of put them together and make something really great. But the best stuff legitimately grows on hillsides.
Where do you buy most of your cacao from?
Right now it's Dominican Republic, and we used to for a lot of years buy it from Guatemala.
Okay.
But there was a really bad drought, and then a couple of climate events that kind of flipped Guatemala, Mexico, and Panama upside down for like cacao in Mexico. They're a net importer they're one of the only countries in the world that grows cacao that's a net importer because it's such a staple of their diet. And they have so many people, and they all, use cacao for either drinks or moles or desserts and all that kind of stuff. And there was
Do they use cacao for moles, or do they use chocolate that came from the cacao?
So it just depends on what your family does. Like if you have trees in your backyard and you ferment the beans, you roast them and you winnow them, then once you ferment cacao, it turns into cocoa in a language sense in America at least. But it's all sorts of different things. But there was a big drought in Guatemala and Dominican Republic, and it went from, I forget what the farm gate price was, but it was more profitable for a farmer to get a wet bag of beans and sell it to somebody that came across the border from Mexico than it was to like sell it to the co-op that they've been selling to for 10 or 15 years. And so we used to buy a bunch of beans from there. And then last year, the cocoa market went crazy. And
what's the size of a cacao?
A pod is like the size of a mini football.
Oh, really? It's that big?
Yeah, there's like 40 to 60 beans inside. You pull the beans out, you ferment them. To make a 60 or 70 kilo bag of beans, it takes something like 1,200
to 14. Do you buy cacao specifically, or do you buy
fermented cocoa?
Okay, so it's already fermented by
yeah. I had a dream once of having like a fermentation box on the deck, and you would get the pit and their smoker and all that wood, and then crank arm the brewery, and when they have spent malt or grain or whatever, you get all that. And I was like, oh, it'd be amazing if we had this fermentation box and we could get essentially the fauna and flora of this street, which I labeled the aroma corridor. But that's a fool's errand to do that. But yeah, that's how we get beans.
The aroma corridor.
Yeah.
You name that's a good idea. Yeah. So there's definitely lots of smells.
Yeah.
Going to Metabolic, when I used to go there all the time, like, man, you'd get there in the morning, like smell with bacon or whatever that they were cooking for the day or whatever. Yeah. Or just the pigs that they were roasting, whatever it is. Yeah. It's a lot of smells over there. And of course, your chocolate.
Yeah, chocolate.
That's certainly beer right next door.
Yeah, beer. Yeah, it's great.
All three fantastic things.
Three great things.
Yeah. Okay, so anything else you want to kind of just share about like what helped you kind of turn the corner for Videri to where it became, because I talked recently about this, like you're involved in the business, but not really like in the day-to-day stuff, right? You're more doing kind of outside stuff.
I don't make chocolate anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird thing. The first thing was going to my friend Matt Fern, who opened Ish Delicatessen. We were going on a sandwich scavenger hunt, essentially I call it. And he took me to Ann Arbor, Michigan. And that was the first time I interacted with Zingerman's Deli. That was a huge turning point because Zingerman's Deli runs a company called Zing Train, where any business can go there, but they are thought leaders in getting as close as you can in the food business to running a lean business where less waste, better ordering practices.
They teach that for other businesses?
They teach it. Yeah, you can go there and do it. But they take a lot of the Toyota Lean or Kata methodology into how they produce food. So that was a huge turning point.
So you got leaner because of that?
Yeah, and then I would go and you could go up to seminars and 3-4 day seminars and learn about this, or go into Zingerman's web order, mail order, and watch how they process. In the height of their season, they do 2 40-foot trucks full of FedEx packages. In you're talking thousands of packages, and when you walk around and you see the system, it's very quiet. It's very calm.
What are they FedExing?
Oh, they do all sorts of stuff. They import olive oil and tinned fish, and you can actually.
So this stuff coming in, not going out.
Yeah, you can they procure a bunch of stuff for all the different businesses, and then they also have like a mail order kind
got
of thing. You can order like a coffee cake from them and a Reuben sandwich, and it'll get to your house in like 2 days.
Wow.
Kind of a thing. So that was a big turning point. And then meeting Mike Rao, my interim CFO at Videri, and now my business partner at Golf. Getting to know the Phipps brothers, Andy and Pete Phipps from Arrow Cut Shops. And then the team that works at Videri now believing in the Zingerman's Zing Train methodology. And then when we implemented open book management in 2021, that's what changed us, like running a business.
Is that where you switched from EOS to that? Because you told me you switched away from something else.
EOS, I think EOS is good if I'm not the kind of person that can run EOS. There's ambiguity in EOS.
Just for anybody listening, that's Entrepreneur Operations System. Book Traction explains it.
Yeah, and it's great. I mean, we ran it for 3-4 years, and a good friend of mine, Paul, was our implementer, and he loves doing it. He still does it.
That's who I have as my implementer. You introduced me to him.
Paul Evering's Magic.
Yeah.
So for me, what I kept seeing was there was this like, the part of EOS that I am not good at is if you don't do something, you have to have a hammer in EOS. And I don't run a company as a hammer. Like, I don't want to get yelled at. I'm not a yeller. In fact, we unfortunately had to let somebody go recently because they yelled at somebody, like one of the coworkers. And I'm like, we don't do that here.
Yeah, it's part of your culture.
Like, literally, we just don't do that. And the thing you were doing wasn't worth that much energy. Like, there's many times where I should have screamed at somebody, and I'm like, okay, this is different. But EOS for me was, you would do all this stuff, and it's like, okay, what happened? All right, great. Like, we had this meeting, we did this thing, but it set us up for the system that open book management has. It's just a bit like the system was better for my brain. And as you know, as a business owner, if it works for you, you can then help other people do it, or you can show them, or you can troubleshoot or whatever. And, we had implementers from Zing Train that implemented open book management with us. And then I actually did another consultation with their accountant. And I said, hey, I need to know some methodology of how you guys pick these lines, or how you get these numbers, or why are they important? And, we really dug into it. And, 2021 you're still in a pandemic. Our gross sales that year were abysmal. And I was like, we have to do this. There's no other way to get through this than trying to be as open and transparent as we possibly can. And what it highlights and very clearly illuminates in those meetings is when somebody isn't doing their job and they're making excuses for why they're not doing their job. And sometimes that person is me.
Yeah.
Sometimes that person is, somebody in the production world or whatever. But what it also does is it gives you this carrot to chase also. If, let's say, wholesale is our goal, is a good example back then, it was like, we're just starting out, we're trying to pick numbers out of the air. We're trying to do $8,000 a week in wholesale to like this one customer base. Okay, it's $6,000. Well, what can we do to make it, easier for them to buy it? Or do we have to raise the price? Or do we even have the product in house? And then from that, you get all this information, which EOS does with like rocks and stuff like that. But this wasn't about talking about what is the important rock to put up there. This was, we don't have enough chocolate to make $8,000 in this one revenue line. Can we do it? Okay, if we can't do it, let's make it what we can and then set our expectation. And then on the other side, we can't spend this much money. So it was, to me, it made more sense. And that was the trigger. And then talking to Andy Phipps on a regular basis for a long time about, like,
you said Arrow?
Arrow, yeah. And they do a bunch of
place, right?
Yeah, they do a bunch of other stuff as well. But he's like a walking spreadsheet, and he can look at your business and be like, this is a good business or that's a bad business. He also himself has like bought into a business and turned it around and then, exited in a positive way. And so he would sit with me and he'd just be like, this isn't going to work if this keeps happening. Mm-hmm. Or you got to get out of the weeds so that you can actually like work on the business instead of in the business, that kind of stuff. Yep. And so those people, and then the people that work at Videri right now, Rachel, Jazzy, Carrie, and Mordecai, and now Ivy are, those managers that take that information from open book and keep the welcoming, friendly, ethos, our core values, and they use them on a daily basis to like create and maintain a good work environment, and then make I mean, I'm saying this because I don't make it anymore, so I can feel like I can say it. But we're like top 10 chocolate maker in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, if you hand chocolate, or any of our chocolate to anybody in the world, they're like, oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, your chocolate's phenomenal.
Yeah, and some people are like, it's phenomenal. But that, I didn't do that. You know, Mordecai and Jazzy took over chocolate making slowly 3-4 years ago. Carrie has been doing confections, you know, now for, I think, exclusively for 7 or 8 years. And Rachel has taken over the sales of that company, and Ivy, and you know, in the retail. I mean, it's incredible. But that, well, seeing Zingerman's for the first time changed my, like,
Just totally, yeah.
yeah, because you got to see it, and it you know, a lot of people say that I can't believe it if I don't see it. And when I walked into Zingerman's Bakehouse, and you just saw like this machine going, and there was no waste or little waste, you're just like, what the fuck is going on? And then they're like, oh, this is what's going on. Here's this book. Here's this thing. Here's how you do this.
I was going to ask, there's got to be a book for that this
Oh,
right?
dude, I think Ari has written maybe 5, 6, 7 books,
Okay.
little pamphlets. And it's interesting because their whole core of their identity is they're anarchist, but anarchy in the beginning of when I forget what, 18 something. Anarchy is about self-determination and community. It's not about like punk rock anarchy, like burn everything down. And what they match those two principles with, if you want a job here, here's the job, here's the offer, here's what we expect you to do, here's how we expect you to act and engage with us. But you're choosing to come here. I'm not making you come to this job.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to work here, okay,
we'll find somebody else.
Yeah, like maybe somebody else will come in.
And maybe something else better for you too.
Yeah, maybe something better. But that was when that happened, that switch happened, it was like, oh, this, because I'm not a micromanager. Like, you can ask Katie about my organizational skills compared to hers. I'm not a micromanager. So if somebody need to be micromanaged, I don't want to do this. Yeah. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of people that worked with us that really wanted me to be a micromanager. I'm like, I'm not that person.
Yeah, it's not a good fit.
Yeah, it's not a good fit. And so, but that, I would say that number one was the switch. And, it was a clarifying point for the Rotar grinder business when I was like, this company's never going to work because of these key factors that I've learned about this other thing. Like, we can't ever scale. There isn't an unlimited number of chocolate makers or nut butter producers in the world that I can sell 500 of these a year.
Yeah, it's just not enough buyers of the product.
Yeah, and the thing was too expensive. And then, our fabricator sold his business and retired. And he was like, sorry, man, I don't make these anymore. I'm like, damn. All right. But there's 30 plus of them around the world, and we only still have 2 at Videri, so that's been a while. But yeah, that's it. I would say that is the thing that kind of
Sam, I have like 5,000. I feel like we just got started on this and we could go for much longer. Unfortunately, we're about to run out of time. I'm going to have you come back for sure, because I definitely want to talk more about like golf and how that's going and your ideas of all that stuff. But man, this was a lot of fun. I feel like we talked for 5 minutes.
Great.
Man, appreciate you coming.
Thanks.
Really quickly, thank you guys so much for watching and listening. Hopefully you enjoyed this as much as I did. Please be sure and like and subscribe and do all those fun things. Share it with your friends. Anybody in Raleigh, especially that that likes chocolate or that likes Videri, I think they'll love this. Sam's a great guy, fun to listen to and share his story. So appreciate you being here, and hope to see you on the next one.